back to my channel. Well, today I've got the next block in the Underground Railroad series, the Shoo-fly block. Now the Shoo-fly block is a very traditional block. Most of you have probably either made it or at least seen it. It's kind of the inside out version of the churn dash block. And I did find out a little bit of information about the Shoo-fly, but not a whole lot. Again, kind of like the sailboat, but there is some information out there. So I'm going to share that with you, and then we'll get sewing today's block. Well, welcome back to my Underground Railroad series. As I said earlier, this time we were talking about the Shoo-fly block. The Shoo-fly block is kind of almost an inside out version of the churn dash block. And it actually has another name. It's either called hole in the wall or hole in the barn door, because the outside pieces are the half square triangles and the inside is the square. So it kind of looks like there's a hole in the middle of the block. So this block is a very historic block. They started seeing it in the early to mid 1800s, and it was passed down generation to generation from mother to daughter. It was a really simple block. It's a very simple block. You guys will see here in a little bit as we sew it. It's just squares and half square triangles sewn together. So it's a really simple block to teach a child, a young girl learning how to sew. Then you'll learn some basic building blocks to make harder blocks. So it was seen through the 1800s and first written in a quilting journal as an official block in the late 1800s, so the 1890s. As in regards to the Underground Railroad, the Shoo-fly block was meant or thought to be a symbol of a person. So if a house or a home had a quilt with Shoo-fly blocks hanging outside of it, it was thought that there was a person there who was willing to help out slaves, whether that would be as former escaped slaves or, other allies that were willing to help these people. But they weren't people that were keeping people in their home. They were people kind of almost near the end of the journey, like in my state of Ohio, that were hiding people in caves, in graveyards, in churches, that kind of thing. So, and it was a temporary hiding spot. It was not some place that they were staying for weeks at a time. It wasn't even several days. It was usually a place that they were staying maybe a night or two until they got the signal that it was time to get on a boat. So either over a river like the Ohio River, or on a boat in Lake Erie to go across to Toronto or Detroit to get out of the area. So that's basically what the Shoo-fly block that I found represents. I know every time I put up one of these videos, I have people say, oh, this is just a myth. I've read that this is all fake. I don't know whether it is or not, to be honest with you. To me, it's very interesting whether it's real or not. Unfortunately, during that time period, history wasn't written down, not like it is today, because you had a lot of people, all races and colors, that did not know how to read and write. So everything was passed down orally. And the first time anyone took down the stories of the Underground Railroad quilts was in the 1920s. And that was the granddaughter of somebody who had formerly been a slave and had escaped. And she had written down, or had actually given the account to someone who wrote down what she told them about what her grandmother had told her. So I hate to discount history, though, because it's important. And there are more than one account of this happening. It was just not this gal, that she's just the most famous one. And I have a hard time believing that there's so many accounts, little bits and pieces, and maybe it doesn't all add up into one thing, but at some point there's got to be some truth in that. And whether you believe that or not, that's okay. I'm still going to keep going with this quilt because I'm really loving unearthing the history of the blocks and hoping that the possibilities that there were quilters out there in the 1800s that were willing to do all this work, make these quilts, to help these people who had a much tougher job than a quilter ever would have to get to freedom. I hope that there was good people back there that were willing to help other human beings. So I'm going to keep going, whether it's a myth or reality. But thank you for those who have been here and have commented. And I don't really care if it's real or not, because I'm enjoying this process. So with that being said, we're going to go ahead and sew up this Shoo-fly block. It's going to be a fun, quick block. The hardest part is going to be making all the half square triangles, because we're going to be making 16 half square triangles, but we're going to do the 8 at a time method to make it go quick. So let's get started. Okay, so let's begin the Shoo-fly block. So the first thing you're going to do is you're going to get some background fabric, which is, I'm going to use this one this time around. And you're going to cut two, I did 6.5 inch squares because I like to have a little extra room to trim down. I think the minimum you can do and still get 2.5 inch half square triangles is like 5 3/4 or something like that. But 6 is probably adequate, but 6.5 gives you just a little bit extra so you can trim those half square triangles down and make sure they're perfect. So I did 2 6.5 inch background squares and 2 6.5 inch print squares. Now I used 2 different greens, but you can use whatever your print color is. I decided on green for this. You can use the same print for the whole block, or you can use 2 different greens. I decided to do 2 different greens because this Shoo-fly block, we're going to make 2 different versions of this block. So I made one ahead of time. This version, which is with my other green, has the green on the outside and the green right here. The other version is the background's going to be on the outside and the green's going to be featured then in here and in the half square triangles. So I went ahead and used 2 different greens, so that way when we sort of reverse this block, it's a little different, but you don't have to do that. You can use the same green throughout the whole thing, or whatever your background or whatever your print color ends up being. So whatever print you're going to use, you'll need 2 of those and 2 of your background 6.5 inch. If you do it the same way as me. And then you're going to need 10 2.5 inch background squares, and you're going to need 10 2.5 inch print squares. Now that might look different, which ones you need where, if you use 2 different prints, so you'll have to kind of figure that out on your own. I honestly, at this point, don't remember which I did for, or how many I did for each one. So there's that. I think I only needed 2, yes, you only need 2 for the squares that are going to end up with the background. So if you use 2 different prints, you're only going to need 2 2.5 inch squares for the ones with the background that end up as the corners and the main fabrics. And then if you're going to make this when you make this version, you need 8. So 8 and 2 if you use 2 different prints, okay? I hope that wasn't too confusing. I know that's a lot. Might be easier if you just use 1 print. I might have made my life harder doing that. So, all right. So I'm going to go ahead and set these squares aside for now. And go ahead and make the half square triangles. So we're going to do the 8 at a time method, like I said. So I already drew my line corner to corner on the back of this. And I'm going to line that up with the print square. And then we're going to sew on both sides of both lines. So we have a line drawn both ways, both diagonals. We're going to sew 1/4 inch on both sides of both lines. Let's go ahead and do that. This is one of the simplest blocks that we've done. The sailboat was really easy, and so is this one. The more blocks I get done, the more excited I am about finishing this quilt. Civil War reproductions are not usually my forte, but I'm really loving this project to the point where I kind of want to make another Civil War reproduction quilt. Kind of funny how it's growing on me. Okay, so I've sewn on both sides of both lines. So now I'm going to grab my rotary cutter and ruler, and we're going to cut this thing apart. Yes, we sewed it together just to cut it all apart again. All right. So I'm going to cut this apart vertically and horizontally, and then we'll cut it apart on the diagonal lines as well. And then we'll press all these towards the print fabric and then trim them down to 2.5 inches. After you do this step, it's pretty much a cakewalk. This is a really simple block. So just cut it there. So we've got all these, and now I'm going to finger press them all towards the green, and then we will press them with the iron. So I'm going to go ahead and press all these, and we'll come back and trim them down and then start sewing this into the block. Well, you can see I've got some half square triangles done here. I've got them all pressed, and I trimmed all but one of them. I'm a little bit slow yet with my hand, so I decided just to do one with you guys so I can show you how I'm doing this in case you're brand new. You're going to take your ruler with your 45-degree line, and you should have either a white or a black line on your ruler, and I'm going to put that right on the seam that I sewed, and I'm going to trim off 2 of the sides, and then I'm going to turn this guy around, and I'm going to do the same thing the other way, except this time I'm going to make sure I'm not only on that seam, but I'm also on the 2.5 inch marking on my ruler. Okay, got that on there, and then I'm going to trim off those other 2 sides, just like that. So now I've got 8 of these half square triangles, so 4 per block, and we can go ahead and lay out this block with the other pieces. Rotary cutter aside, don't need that guy anymore. So this block, since he is my background one with the, well, the background is the feature in this block, I should say. That's probably a better way to say it. I'm going to go ahead and put all those squares down first so I know which way to turn this. So I want my green touching my green, so the background's going to be out. Just like that. Now, when you do the opposite one, you're going to have the green out, and you're going to have your background touching your center. So can you see the difference? So just if you're going to do if you're going to do the opposite ones like that, especially if you're using 2 different prints, pay really close attention to your fabric placement. So now all we have to do is sew all these rows together. So let's go ahead and do that. Really simple. So I'm just going to do 1 row at a time, and I'm not going to press until I have all the rows done. We'll press all the rows at the same time. And it saves a little time than going back and forth to the ironing station, or even bringing it over to yourself. And then we'll press all the rows, and then we'll put the rows together and make the block. Real nice and quick. And now we have to make 4 of these little blocks to make the actual whole Shoo-fly block that we're using in the quilt. One of these is considered a Shoo-fly block, but we're putting 4 together to make kind of a fancier Shoo-fly block, I guess, for lack of a better term. I'm just giving them a finger press in between so they kind of start to lay where I want them to. I'm actually going to press them when we're all done with all 3. And again, these little units, if you're doing the 12.5 inch size blocks like I am, making the quilt and not just the wall hanging, these little ones are going to be 6.5 before we put them in the block. So if you're one of those that likes to measure as you go to make sure everything's correct. Kudos to you if you're doing the 6 inch size blocks and making 4 small 3 inch Shoo-fly blocks. That's a lot of little pieces. Especially those half square triangles, they're going to be tiny. All right, so I've got all 3 rows sewn. So now I'm going to grab my ironing things. We're going to go ahead and put some magic juice on there. Alrighty. Alright, those are pressed. I love when you press it and it's nice and flat. Alright, so now I'm going to line this back up so I don't mix it up how it goes. And we're going to go ahead and sew these rows together. Again, my background on this version is going to be on the outside. So just a check for yourself. Finger press that in. I'm pressing all of mine in towards the center because these are more solid pieces and these are half square triangles, so I feel like they're going to lay better. And there's also another reason, which I'll get to here in a minute. I'll show you guys. Okay, now let's give that a press with the iron. So I pressed all my blocks in towards the center, the rows on all my blocks. So that one's done. Now I'm going to grab one of the other colorway blocks, the greens. So I've pressed these towards the center, these are pressed towards the center, so now all I have to do is turn one of these and they should nest together right here, or turn this guy and they should nest together right here. So because now they're going opposite directions, right? They're all pressed in, so if I turn one of the blocks, they're going to nest right here. So you don't have to really, if you press them all the same way, you don't have to think about which way to press them. Are they going to nest? They just will if you turn one of the blocks. And this works as long as you're not using directional fabric. If you're using directional fabric, sorry, you're going to have to figure out pressing directions. Yep. There's not a whole lot I found. There are some, so I'm not going to say there's none. But I've noticed in Civil War reproductions, there's not a lot of directional prints. Except for maybe in some of the shirtings. But like just the tosses, or just the quilting fabrics, there seems to be They seem to be more tosses, so you don't have to worry about directionals as much, which is nice. Okay, so I've attached the opposite two colors together. I already did that with this one. So I pressed this one towards the green, so I'm going to press this one towards the green. I'm calling this the green block just because it's got more green in it than background. This is the background block. So I'm going to press this one towards the green, and then we're going to sew them together like this with the two different colors opposite corners. So you make 4 little blocks and to turn it into these one big block, but 2 rows of 2 and then into 1 big block. Okay. So now I'm just going to join those up. Our block will be finished. You might want to pin this if you are more comfortable with that. All right. Oh, that center hit dead on. Yay. I'm really excited about that. Okay. Awesome. All right. So now all we have to do is press this and we're done. And I'm almost out of magic juice. I got to refill this. Well, thanks so much for joining me today. I hope you enjoyed sewing up our little Shoo-fly block. Oh, that looks so much better even on camera or on video like that than looking at it in person. That center came together really nicely. The points matched up. So yay, it's a win. As you can see, I've got all my other blocks on the wall behind me. So this is block number 7. There are 15 in this quilt plus the little extra label that I showed you to make the 16th if you want to, or you can just make it a 15 block quilt. So we're about halfway there, little less than halfway. There's not really a good halfway, but so next week I'll be back with another block or 2. We'll see how my hand holds up, see if I can get 2 out again next week. I'm really anxious to get this quilt done, so I'm hoping I can get 2 of them done. But thank you so much again for being here. Whether, like I said earlier, you believe in the Underground Railroad, myth versus reality, thank you for being here. I'm enjoying sharing this with you guys, and I'm enjoying sewing and doing the process with you guys. So I will see you really soon. Hopefully tomorrow evening on my live right here on my channel, live at 5 p.m. Free pattern from Art East Quilting. There she blows. Great way to try an Art East quilting pattern. They're a wonderful company. I've done a lot of their patterns, and I know a lot of people have said, well, I'm not sure about them because they look intimidating. I promise they're not. The cutting is the hardest part. So get your stuff cut, come on over and sew with me, and I'll show you how easy it is. See you then. Bye.